David Otto, he's a global counter-terrorism consultant, is joining us live from Abidjan to speak on this latest coup scare in Benin Republic. Good to have you, David, on Newsnight tonight. Well, I mean, first your thoughts, really, because it does seem that the West African sub-region is becoming a coup belt. Last year, in the same Benin Republic, there was an attempted coup. Thankfully, it was foiled, and this one too has been foiled. What does this coup attempt, again, the seventh successful one in the sub-region, of course, this eighth attempt has failed. What do you think it means for the sub-region? And would you say that the fact that this has been foiled will act as a deterrent to would-be coup plotters?
Well, I think it's going to be very difficult for us to see the coup that has been foiled as some way, as some kind of a deterrent. We are not losing count in terms of the number of military takeovers in the continent, and as you rightly said, the coup belt continues to increase and to make democracy seem as dead in the waters, especially as far as the western part of Africa is concerned, and the Sahel region. What we're experiencing here that we're increasingly seeing democracy is being dragged to the floor. We are not just talking about military coups. We're talking about governments successfully changing constitutions. We're talking about elections, being proclaimed, fraudulently and won by so-called democratic systems. And all of this, I term them as military coup d'etat. But what is quite particular about what we're seeing now in the case of Benin Republic is the fact that you had a president who had indicated clearly that he will not run any for the next elections that are coming up in April. One would have thought that coup d'etats would be against perhaps presidents that are sitting tight in power. But that's increasingly not the case. So we're seeing justifications being used, and this time, the coup has failed. But what stands out very clearly is the fact that it tells one, common denominator that the military in Africa is becoming, a pain in the democratic system that exists. Because it's the military that took power, and it's also the military that came to foil this coup d'etat. So it's getting worse, and I don't see, how the African countries are going to cope with this at this point in time.
Yes, indeed. And of course, ECOWAS and the Nigerian government have already condemned the coup attempt. But beyond condemnation, what can ECOWAS and indeed Nigeria do to push back? And while you treat that, France is saying that it is ready to support Nigeria in the fight against terrorism. Recall that France has been linked to the insecurity or the crisis in the Sahel region. How desirable is France's support for Nigeria in the area of anti-terrorism war?
I think looking at the situation of ECOWAS now, ECOWAS cannot afford to lose more members. If you look at the condemnation from ECOWAS, it clearly states that the coup has been foiled. But then it goes on to say that it is ready to do whatever it takes to restore constitutional, democracy, to restore, to maintain the sovereignty of the Benin Republic. But he only says that, prior to saying that the coup has failed and that it could deploy its ECOWAS standby force. Now, the question that a lot of people are asking is, why did ECOWAS not do the same with just the recent coup d'etat happened in Benin, Guinea-Bissau? One would have thought that the ECOWAS standby force would have been used. But the good news is I understand that Nigeria has been able to deploy some fighter jets, perhaps to kind of intimidate the coup plotters, but also to have that aerial support that would allow for the ground troops within Benin to be able to take back power from the military junta, which is, a very good news. And this is something that one would have expected in terms of Nigeria playing that big brother role in terms of quick interventions. And this didn't happen in the case of Guinea-Bissau and other cases. So I think lessons have been learned. Nigeria is taking, a bulk of the responsibilities that ECOWAS is supposed to take. I understand that other countries were involved, but this is not confirmed in terms of, helping to restore the power, being overthrown in Guinea-Bissau. In terms of France, I think, as you rightly said, I do not see the role of France in intervening in these kind of situations. I believe that France should not be seen in the forefront of any jihadist crisis within Africa, even within Nigeria. Nigeria has been able to counter these jihadist incursions. We know that there are challenges. But I don't think that France or either any external country should be involved. I think Nigeria should be able to deal with this insecurity once it has its strategies put in place. The challenge is within. The challenge is not outside. So I do not expect, even if President Macron has declared his support for Nigeria, I don't see any difference that would make if Nigeria is not able by itself, to deal with the level of insecurity. I don't think it's France that would help it deal with it.
And very quickly, before we wrap things up in this conversation, freezing on military retirements in Nigeria. The president, recall, declared a state of emergency in Nigeria's security situation and has now directed or ordered that there should be a freeze on military retirements. What your thoughts on this? Is it a welcome development, especially when you consider the categories of those who will be eligible? And indeed, it's going to be voluntary and it will not be a forced situation.
Well, I think if you freeze military, then you've got to have a reason why that particular strategy would work. What comes in mind very clearly is that the Nigerian military has often talked about the fact that, they have, a shortage in terms of personnel, but also, it depends on, what, again, the president wants to achieve by these top military brass, in terms of freezing that. I see this as perhaps, a way to continue to use the experience that these military personnel have to try and recalibrate, and rethink on what the counterinsurgency strategy would look like within the African region. There is no other country that has more battle-tested experience, that has learned from a lot of challenges like the Nigerian military. In order for any, there has to be some kind of an instep or an intentional project to allow for the military to be able to use this.
To be losing connection. Very quickly, if I can, there's been a lot of talk about your condemnation of the retirement or premature retirement of officers because of appointments of, special service chiefs and all of that. Do you think this will address that issue?
I think, when I talk to my colleague, then, there are particular concerns that could arise as a result. Some officers see that as welcome, decision. A lot of them want to be able to go out there, do other things within the civilian world. Some of them prefer to stay in the military, and those who prefer to stay in the military would see it as a disadvantage. But I think, before any decisions are made in terms of appointing service chiefs, because within the military, no senior leader wants to greet a junior leader, which is, the case when you appoint a junior, general as the chief of army staff or service chiefs. That is one issue. But I think the most important thing is preparation. And I think this is where the government often makes a mistake in terms of, knee-jerk reaction, changing service chiefs, without any planning and preparation, for obvious reasons, as the president said, to rejig the security. But things must be planned, because, the second order effect of appointing new service chiefs, could lead to a gap, a huge one in terms of the national strategy.
Hopefully the right incentives will be put in place for this, army or soldiers to actually volunteer themselves. David Otto is a global counterterrorism consultant joining us tonight on Newsnight.